Hi guys, I want to give you a quick overview of what we're doing this week, the annotated bibliography that we are working towards. This is a hard week. There's a lot of reading that you're going to have to do in the next, about 7 to 8 days. It's important reading. It is work that's going to show up in your final paper. So don't scrimp now, because it's stuff that we're going to use. We will use it in your final paper, absolutely. What is important to understand is that we've done a lot of the work so far. We do understand what discourse communities are. You've chosen a community to study. This week we're going to dive deep into what other scholars have said about your community so that we have some raw material that we can use next week for our literature review. That literature review is going to be submitted in draft form. It's not going to be perfect. It's going to be part of your research proposal. And by the end of the semester, you're going to have a chance to revise your literature review. It's going to be beautiful. You are going to sound like a scholar, but it all starts with your annotated bibliography. Just in case it's not clear, we need to understand how this thing is a process. You found your 10 articles. You're going to now read those 10 articles, and it's totally fine if you want to swap out a few of your articles and get new ones or better ones. The goal is just to have 10 articles that indicate how scholars are talking about your particular community, how they're researching your community. And then again, this annotated bibliography feeds into the writing that we do next week that we will end up revising for your final paper. What's an annotation? It's a summary. It's a very formalized summary. The reading that you did for Tuesday, this was in Table 6. It's one of the questions in the quiz if you have not taken it yet. Tells us that when you do an annotation, it should feel repetitive. Every single one of these annotations, you're going to have to do the APA reference, which is this stuff, right? But then down in your summary, you're going to talk about the things that we talked about in your infographics. What's the purpose of doing this research? What's the research gap? What are the author's research questions? How did they do their research? Who did they research on? Who did they study? Where did they study them? For how long did they study them? In what setting did they study them? As many details as you can personally express about the research that you read. The major findings, the results, the significance of the study, all of that. I want to hear from you in your own voice, not from quotes, not directly restating what is said in your article, but from you in your own voice, paraphrasing what your article says. This is a lot of reading. And it's not going to be easy, but I think that's why we started with the infographic, is you know what to look for. You know how to attack these scholarly articles and where the meaty parts of these articles are. In your annotation of each source, your summary of each source, tell me what the really important parts of every article are. Instead of talking about strengths and weaknesses of these articles, I'm more interested in having you tell me, does it directly talk about discourse or communication, or doesn't it? And it's okay if it doesn't. It's okay to say in your annotation, this article does not in any way, shape, or form talk about the communication patterns of my group, because you're going to. That's a research gap. Really important to understand, although it will be tempting to just read over the abstract and give me a summary of the abstract. You can't do that. It's also really obvious when people do that. Abstracts are there to help you understand what you're about to read. They're there to give you guidelines on how to read effectively, but you cannot turn in an annotated bibliography that is merely you taking an abstract, swapping out a few words, and presenting that as your annotation. The annotations need to be more detailed than an abstract. The annotations need to reflect your understanding of the research goals, the research methods, the research results, and the significance of the study. I need to hear your voice. I don't really want a plagiarized version of the abstract in your annotated bibliography. Why? It's academically dishonest. That's just not how we're supposed to use abstracts. Another thing you want to do is maybe not spend a whole lot of time telling me what the literature review of each article discusses, because the literature review is your author summarizing other people's work. When I'm getting an annotation from you about a particular article, I want to know what you understand the research goals, the research methods, the research results, and the research significance are in that particular article. So don't cite from the abstract, don't cite from the literature review. That goes for this assignment and for any research assignment that you ever do. In each annotation, you have to remember that you are discussing authors and what authors have done, and people, the authors who have done research. So make sure that you are referring to people, not articles. Good signal phrases in APA format always have last name and then the date in parentheses. You can look at chapter 11.4 for more information about APA signal phrases. You can look at the model annotated bibliography that is in Thursday's discussion. You can also Google APA signal phrases. Sorry, this keeps jumping ahead. But make sure you're using them. You want to be consistently and constantly referring to authors by last name and date, because that's how APA does it, and because we want to give credit to the human beings who have done the research, because that's who does research, people, not articles. Final thoughts, each annotation should be about a paragraph. You definitely want to use your own words to convey to me that you understood this thing, maybe not perfectly, but you get the gist of the research that these people did. And more than that, you can understand it at a level that goes deeper than what the abstract tells us. Make sure that you're using the model, the example annotated bibliography that's inside of discussion, and make your annotations look like that model. Now I want to show you an example of this is from the model paper, right? This is a cover page, an APA formatted cover page, which you don't need for your annotated bibliography. You don't. If you have one, this is great. Go ahead and use it. Notice that this person has the title of their paper up here. I don't expect that you have a title yet. This is where your name would go, and this is the name of our institution. But what we have here is a works cited page, and you guys have this. You submitted this on Sunday. So what you need to do for your annotated bibliography is not start from scratch, but go right into your references. And when I'm ready to summarize this particular article, Aubrey Adams, this needs to be fixed. Aha, now it's correct, because we only use, actually there are a lot of errors in this works cited now that I am looking at it. We always take out the first name and only leave the first initial. Okay, now we're looking good. Oops, I deleted a whole bunch of stuff I wasn't supposed to. Okay, so now we have a list of works found. And what do you do with this to create your annotated bibliography? You just start typing right onto here, right? And look at this. Look at my beautiful and wonderful text, right? Now, of course, instead of nonsense, you would be typing all of the content that you need to answer for each source. What is the research gap? What are the research goals? What are the research methods? What are the research results? Does this author in any way, shape, or form indicate anything about discourse? Yes, they do talk about communication patterns, or just much more likely, no, they don't say a thing about communication patterns. So that's all you need to do. Take your work from last week, add on to it. You can make any changes, certainly, that need to be made in terms of formatting, and submit this baby. You'll be done.